My name is Howard Sinclair. I'm Strategic Director with the Prime Medical Group. There's a number of answers to that question. The principal answer is really to maximise the impact of the data, the clinical data that the company has really spent so much time, energy, effort and money really in achieving. But I think a communication strategy allows you to really select who the appropriate target audiences are. It allows you to understand the hierarchies within these target audiences. It also allows you to select the most appropriate communication media for these target audiences, and that would include obviously the more traditional media and the digital side of things. But really importantly, it allows the client to maximise the return on their clinical studies investment. I think we need to think about it, the earlier the better we think about it, but certainly when a client is putting any clinical information or thinking about putting any clinical information into the public domain, then they need to have a communication strategy in place, because that is saying a lot about the product and indeed about the organisation concerned as well. And the last thing any client wants is inconsistency on that side of things. So they want to really have a concerted programme and integrated programme that sends out really clear messages about the product and indeed about the organisation as well. Right, when putting together a plan, the company will obviously already have a good understanding of their data, but it's really understanding how that data fits within the commercial environment that they're going to go into. So really understanding what the needs are within that commercial environment, so that they can then develop the appropriate targeting of these needs amongst their various target audiences, and then develop the appropriate story flow, because it's a story when the MSLs are out there talking to their customers. There needs to be a sound rationale for using the product. Why use this product as opposed to what they've been doing really in the past. A lot of companies do not think about a communication plan. I think very often the larger companies have the structure, and it's part of their setup. But of course, in this field, we're dealing with a lot of small biotechnology companies, and I think they're very, very good on the scientific side of things, perhaps on the medical affairs and regulatory side of things. Perhaps on the commercial side, they're maybe not particularly strong, and therefore, in these kind of companies, the whole idea of a communication strategy and plan might be a little bit alien to them, and certainly wouldn't be very high up the priority list. Now, I would argue that it should be very high up the priority list. And they need to be thinking about it sooner rather than later. I think if we look at the reasons why a communication plan is important, almost to turn that on its head and say, right, well, if you don't have a communication strategy and plan, what is going to happen? Well, you're probably not going to have a coordinated approach to your communications. So everything will be at 6s and 7s. In terms of the people that you really want to focus on out there, they'll be getting very mixed messages. You might actually not even be getting through to the right people that you need to be getting to, because we're constantly aware that in this IT society, then there's information overload. So we have to really make the information stand out that's relevant. But from the company's point of view, there's no use having a broad splattergun type of approach here. You can perhaps get away with that in other areas of medicine, but these sort of areas where there's very limited numbers of patients, then you clearly have to have a really very focused approach, and to really do the homework in advance, i.e. develop the communication strategy and plan so that you know who you should be targeting and basically getting return on any investment you put into the communication program. Well, they won't, particularly when we're talking about rare diseases here, then we know the patients are few and far between. So we have to be giving the physicians the right information so that they can actually identify these patients and then either treat them themselves or refer them to the treatment centres, because in a lot of these rare diseases the treatment is so specialist, and certainly now that we're moving into gene therapies, then it's important that these patients are treated in centres where there really is strong expertise in terms of how to administer the therapy and also the aftercare process as well for the patient. I mean, they've got to really work out the patient journey algorithm. So the patient journey algorithm is basically, where does the patient go from showing first symptoms through to diagnosis, through to treatment being initiated, and then the routine management after treatment is initiated. So that aspect is very, very important, and it's important for the company to communicate with the physicians who might be involved in all of these steps, because the physician who makes the diagnosis may not be the same physician who instigates treatment. And sometimes with some of the rare diseases, the patient experiences one symptom, so he goes to, say, a neurologist, and the neurologist treats that neurological symptom, but there might actually be kidney problems as well. So the next time he presents with kidney problems, and he goes to the nephrologist, and the nephrologist treats that. So you're only kind of getting a bit of a picture, and what you ideally want is that there's a full diagnosis made, and it's important that the patients are referred really as quickly as possible to that centre where the diagnosis can be made, and then if it's not the same centre, on to the appropriate treatment centre if there is a confirmed diagnosis there. Well, I think this is where the communication programme really comes into its own, because I think the company really has to generate that awareness amongst these various physicians in terms of what their roles are. Is the role simply to refer the patient to a particular kind of other specialist? Is it a case that they should be referring them to the treatment centre? And these are key elements of a communication programme for a gene therapy type product. To make sure that there's clear instructions, and because the aim is to get the patient from when they first experience symptoms onto that treatment, assuming the treatment is appropriate for them, really as rapidly as possible. In some of the rare diseases, there has been a big time lag between patients showing first symptoms and a diagnosis being made. An area that we've worked in has been hereditary angioedema, and the average time from all the records across Europe and the United States is about 12 years from the patient experiencing the first symptom to getting a confirmed hereditary angioedema diagnosis. And until you've got the confirmed diagnosis, then you're obviously you've no chance of getting the appropriate treatment. Okay, the three main challenges companies face are skepticism, information overload, and commercialization. I think in the gene therapy field specifically, there's a lot of skepticism. I think gene therapy has been something that's been a big promise for, 30 years, a large chunk of my lifetime. I think now we've got to the stage where it's beginning to successfully deliver. But there's skepticism amongst both the medical profession and the patients about what gene therapy can do, because I think it was billed maybe about 20 years ago that gene therapy was the next big thing and it was going to solve all these problems. And I'm confident that it will solve an awful lot of problems going forward, but it's taken rather longer than we all anticipated. So that is in terms of the perception side of things. Information overload, I think physicians particularly, and patients probably to a lesser extent, in the IT age in which we live, people are bombarded with information right, left and centre, and it's very, very difficult for people to sift through, and certainly for a physician where we're talking here about very rare conditions, for them to have their antennae up to be able to identify the patient. So I think the communication strategy is therefore very, very important to help that physician to identify the patient and to inform him as to what the appropriate action should be once he has identified that particular patient. And then the third thing is the commercialization side of things, and there's a lot of challenges in the commercialization side. It's inevitable that because of the complexity of gene therapy products, that they will be very, very expensive products and perceived as very expensive products. But most of them will probably be, or hopefully be, as based on what we know at this stage, a once-in-a-lifetime treatment. So if we're looking, it will be a big cost and a big initial cost, but if that treatment is going to satisfy the patient for the rest of their life, then relative to other agents available at the present time, these will not be particularly expensive treatments. But of course, the data, with one of the leading gene therapy products, the only one that's, there are two now approved, but the first one to be approved, Glybera, they currently have clinical data up to 7 years. So it's rolling clinical data, so they can make the claim at the present time that patients can be successfully treated up to 7 years, but they can't make a claim that they can be successfully treated for all of their lives.